In an episode of Rick and Morty, Rick had a questionable idea, a questionable plan, and Morty afterwards is pretty annoyed with Rick, and he's pushing him, and he's goading him, and he's looking for a confession. He's looking for an admission that that was a bad plan, and he's keeping at him. He's keeping at him, and Rick is not giving in. He simply retorts, "Morty, there's no such thing as a bad idea. It's about execution." So I thought that was a really interesting point. If there's no such thing as a bad idea and it's all about execution, then, can you dismiss the bad ideas? Can you throw away, terrible notions? And in that respect, amazing episodes of Rick and Morty can be born out of very simple and very boring storylines. And when I looked back, I remembered that they actually did. So the episode with intergalactic TV, is born out of a very simple idea. Instead of going off on an adventure across galaxies and universes and fighting, intergalactic aliens, instead all they do is sit at home and watch TV. And you as a viewer is sitting at home watching them sit at home watch TV. But it was done in such a way that it makes for an amazing episode, a memorable episode that any fan of Rick and Morty would talk about that episode. It's done in such a way because instead of watching regular human TV or TV that we would be accustomed to, instead they're watching intergalactic TV, right? And there's so much humor and novelty packed into the programs that the characters watch that it makes for a very good, very humorous episode, and it's often ones that fans will talk about. So let's see if you can guess these movies based on the description. It's a film set in Second World War in Germany, and the main character believes all the Nazi propaganda, and it's a bit of a silly comedy, right? Now, on the surface, that sounds like a bad idea, right? That sounds like a terrible idea. Who would want, a silly comedy set in the time around the Holocaust? That sounds awful. A silly comedy from the Nazi point of view? That sounds awful, right? And yet, Taika Waititi in Jojo Rabbit struck the balance between comedy and sadness beautifully. Like, I don't think, there are a few people on this world who could have done it as well as he did it. His execution was unbelievable, right? And that's just not my opinion. No, that's not just my opinion. The movie also got 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's got 7.9 on IMDb, and anyone I talk to kind of raves about Jojo Rabbit. It was so well done. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that one. Let's go for the next one. Okay, so this one, right? These two meet. The boy and girl meet. They become friends, and then over the years they start to develop romantic feelings for each other. But they fear that if they sleep together, that they will end their relationship. Eventually, they get over that fear, and they end up together. And that's the rom-com. And yes, that doesn't sound very exciting. It doesn't sound very interesting. It's not Romeo and Juliet where, they're on either sides of a war. There's no, real huge cultural threat to them getting together. It's just, can they bridge the gap between friendship and romantic relationship? And yet that description doesn't do it justice. And yet, When Harry Met Sally holds a very special place in the hearts of all those who love rom-coms. That description doesn't talk about, the restaurant scene. I'll have what she's having. And it doesn't do justice to the New Year's Eve speech. It was about the execution. It wasn't about the storyline, them getting together, because every rom-com ever pretty much is the boy meets girl and they end up getting together. Now for my third one, right, which kind of follows on this rom-com theme. Boy and girl meet, and you spend the whole movie rooting for them to get together, and despite a song and dance, they end up getting together, only for them to then break up and choose their careers instead. You're like, What? That's a terrible idea. Are you kidding me? A rom-com where the boy and girl don't end up together in the end? That's awful. That's a terrible rom-com. That's like staple number one. They have to end up together, right? And yet that doesn't do it justice at all. The movie I'm talking about is La La Land. You know, despite them not being together, in the end, there's something about the ending that makes it feel like it's a happy ending, like it's a positive ending, you know? It's not a sad ending that they're not ending up together. They both got to fulfill their dreams, you know? So it was all in that execution, you know? Like, on the surface, it does sound like a bad idea. Rom-com, they're supposed to get together. But it was the way it was done. It was just so well done that you left feeling like it was a positive note. So, in order to try and help me define what I'm trying to say, let's try and explore the opposite. If proper execution is, you know, effort and packing a load of creativity and realism and showing a lot of problem solving, then let's explore the opposite of that, which can kind of be described as contrived moments. For example, now don't get me wrong, I love Star Wars. I'm a big Star Wars fan. Love the movies, and I think the movies are still great despite these moments. But you know, these moments, they're like a bit questionable, right? The Death Star is built with a huge design flaw, right? The Death Star, you think like the designer, the architect, you know, maybe even the generals, they'd put up a bit of plywood or something to stop that vent getting a few ray beams sent down there and destroying the whole thing. Like, why is that even made? Why did they even make that with one huge design flaw? You know, like, that's like, you know, is that realistic? You know, all the people involved in creating that, you know, that space station, you know, is it realistic that they would have one giant design flaw, and nobody would say anything about it, and no one would make any attempts to kind of fortify that weakness, right? That's one Star Wars one. The second one, ironically, comes in the next episode. Luke is given instructions by Obi-Wan to find the Jedi Master Yoda in the Dagobah system. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with space terms, a system consists of, it's a group of planets, multiple planets. So, for example, Earth exists in the solar system, right? 8 planets, now that Pluto is backed off. So, now, 8 planets, right? So Luke has to, in order to find Yoda, he has to go to this system where there are multiple planets and search the planets and search each planet at a time. And one, you know, they could be vastly bigger than Earth. And yet, in the movie, Luke lands within 100 yards of Yoda, right? Are you kidding me? Like, you know, that's ridiculous. Come on now, that's a bit too convenient, right? You know, it's not like he landed on, let's say, the right planet. Let's say the Yoda's planet, but the equivalent of China, and he had to travel locally to the equivalent of the States. He landed on Yoda's doorstep, you know, and like, you know, fans of movies might say, oh yeah, the Force pulled him there and all that, you know, but still, like, you know, that's quite contrived, you know, it's a bit too convenient. So to try and explain more around what is alluded to in that Rick and Morty line, it's about execution. I think it's about effort and realism. I think one of the things about Christopher Nolan's Batman movies and why they were so popular is because it really felt like if there was a Batman today, that is what it would look like. You know, it felt like he brought it into our world and made it quite realistic, right? And I think that's the same with movies like The Equalizer, right? Denzel Washington against 50 bad guys, right? And I think, you know, it's the effort the writer and the filmmakers put in that makes it impressive. You know, had all the bad guys lined up right next to each other and Denzel just shot one bullet and took them all out, you'd be like, oh, for feck's sake, that's just lazy writing, right? But instead, you know, he takes the time to pick them off one by one, right? And then you think, oh yeah, you know, that actually could be done. You know, it's a bit more realistic, you know, and it's quite impressive in how he does it, you know, because he's in a DIY garden store and he doesn't have a gun himself. He's using all the props around him. So you're like, oh wow, this is actually really cool, you know. One guy taking out all 20 before he gets to the boss, you know. So I think it's that effort and it's that generosity that you're putting on a show, and that you're not going to take it easy on yourself, the writer, in order to entertain the audience, right? That you're not going to lead to contrived moments or convenient plot moments in order to get yourself out of a hole. You're actually going to put in the effort, you're going to problem solve it, and you're going to do it in such a way that instead of the audience groaning, they're actually really impressed by what happens. So to bring this video to an end and to conclude this kind of theory, this meandering, rambling rant around this Rick and Morty line, the theory, by that logic, you know, it's not about waiting for good ideas, but more so investing enough time and effort in the bad ideas, or the ideas in their infancy, in order for them to transform into a fully fledged, comprehensive plan. And that's it. That's all I have for you today. I'm Thomas. I hope this helps.